Ahead to Thompson. Tage Thompson with Logan Cooley. Thompson in, shoots, scores! Tage Thompson, golden goal! And the United States has won the World Hockey Championship for the first time in 92 years.
Who should make the United States Olympic hockey roster? That is a question on many fans' minds as the US looks to take gold and take their top spot on top of the hockey world at last. This is the first part of my series over the next 5 weeks that will go over the projected Olympic rosters for the Big Five hockey nations. Today's the States, and we'll follow it with Czechia, Finland, Sweden, and Canada in the coming weeks. First, some ground rules. These are specifically the rosters I would create to give what in my opinion is the best chance for each of these countries to win gold in Milan come February. I'll go over line by line what I've picked and why each player needs their spot on the team in their specific role, keeping in mind that teams will need everything from offensive stars to shut down penalty killers. I'm filling these out to the full 25-man Olympic roster sizes, so 14 forwards, 8 defensemen, and 3 goalies will be on each roster, and then I'll talk about some notable cuts at the end of each position group. With that out of the way, let's take a look at who I think should be named to the United States Olympic team. At forward, my first line is Tkachuk, Eichel, Tkachuk. I think this is a pretty easy one to kind of take a look at. It's something that they used last year at the Four Nations. Obviously, both Tkachuks were dealing with small injury problems, and they both are right now. I'm operating under the assumption that they should both be back in time. That's what the reporting says. But obviously, Matthew Tkachuk, at his best, is an elite power forward. He can score. He can get under the skin of opponents. We saw that they liked playing him and Brady Tkachuk together last year, which wasn't something that I thought they would do heading into the tournament. I thought they'd try and separate them to kind of keep both power forwards on separate lines to kind of give you that different edge up and down the lineup, but they like to load them up together. And I think their best look was when they were with Jack Eichel in the middle rather than a Matthews or even a Larkin. So I've kept them together with Eichel here. Eichel's a good defensive center. He can get up and down the ice. He likes to, be the guy to carry the puck, which helps with the Tkachuks, who I think are guys who would rather get the puck in the offensive zone, maybe deeper in the zone and start working that way. And then Eichel can pop high. He can play make. He can shoot. The Tkachuks can kind of interchange and, go to the net. They like to go low to high. I think they've got, obviously they're brothers, so they've got good chemistry that way. And so this is a line that I think is mostly holding over from the Four Nations. Obviously, everything will be interchanged in and around a little bit. Like, these guys are not consistent teammates, so when you get into a big competition like this, a lot of it's just about finding whoever you've got chemistry with at that time. I do think lines that were successful at the Four Nations like this one will probably remain intact just because, you've had that chemistry before. It's an easy thing to just go back and do it again. So this is my first line. I don't think there should be anything too crazy about that. Maybe you could argue Matthews should be in between the Tkachuks instead of Eichel, but I think Eichel's had a better season this year. I think his play style fits a little bit better considering his strengths of, being that third guy to lead the breakout, being the guy that wants to dominate zone entries a little bit more than Matthews, who, again, more similar to the Tkachuks, would rather, find soft ice and, work in the corners, work in tight areas a little bit more. So moving on to the second line, I have Matt Boldy with Austin Matthews and Jack Hughes. Jack Hughes had a tough tournament last year. Obviously, he's hurt right now, but he should be back for the Olympics, just like both Tkachuk brothers. So is Matthews, for that matter. But I think putting him with two bigger guys in Matthews and Boldy had a great tournament last year. He played a little bit more with Dylan Larkin than he did with Austin Matthews, but he's a really big body. He can do it all on the ice. He can lead the forecheck and be F1, which is something that I don't think Matthews and Hughes really want to be. He doesn't need the puck to be super successful. He can kind of get in front of the net. Obviously, Jack Hughes should be the puck carrier on this line. He should do most of that work. It should kind of flow through him and attack. Then obviously the gravity that Austin Matthews possesses as a shooter is as big as anyone in the league. So I think this puts Jack Hughes in the best spot to succeed for him. Obviously, the physicality he tended to struggle with a little bit last year. Everything was so tight checking, and I don't imagine that's going to change in the Olympics. So I think putting him with Boldy, whose speed and size and physicality can kind of create a little bit more space, and then Matthews, who has that gravity that I was talking about just a little bit ago to kind of pull everyone away from Jack Hughes. It'll allow Jack to just play his game a little bit more and be so dangerous like we see, with Jesper Brad in the NHL, just with slightly different line mates here. Moving on to the third line, I have Jake Gensel with Dylan Larkin and Jason Robertson. Robertson is the first player I've named on this roster that was not on last year's Four Nations roster. Obviously, there was a lot made. He had a really slow start to 2024-25. Then after he kind of got snubbed, he really turned it on and has been one of the best scorers in the league since. I don't think they can leave him off this year. Even if his foot speed isn't the best, even if he's not the most well-rounded player in the world, his ability to score and score in different ways is just so important to this team. And I think putting him with a couple speedsters like Larkin and Gensel that are really responsible defensively, that are really north-south, will help with Robertson. He can play a little bit more of that east-west game. He can add a little bit of a different look with that line. Gensel's a very smart goal scorer. Larkin is a very good do-it-all player. All three of these guys can kind of take their turns in transition. I don't have any problems with this line in the defensive zone. I think this is just a really good all-around third line. It can probably go up there with basically any other third line in the tournament. You could even use it as a bit of a shutdown line at times if you want. And they're three guys who are elite 5-on-5 scorers. They don't need the power play to kind of put up points. And you're going to need depth goals in this tournament. And I think this is a line with three guys that can all score you a big depth goal at a big time, which is going to be important come the Olympics. My fourth line, and this will probably differ most from where, they actually choose to go, Mike Sullivan and the coaching staff and, Bill Guerin and all that stuff. But in my opinion, the U.S. needs depth scoring. I think the U.S. needs a lot of offense. They need to try and win the game by scoring more goals than the opposition team. I think we saw the problem last year with what they tried to do in terms of grit and more just defensive players in the bottom six. And obviously those guys need their spots, but you need guys who can score. But I have Kyle Connor with Tage Thompson and Troy Terry on this fourth line. It's definitely different than the other lines they have here. These are three guys that like to shoot and like to score. Kyle Connor is so quick, he can really stretch the ice that way. Tage Thompson is just so tough to play against when he's at his best, just with the size and skating and skill combo. Like, nobody else in the league can really match that the way he can right now. And then Troy Terry is a responsible guy that plays with them. I kind of have Terry in the lineup, imagining that he can play on the penalty kill. He can be a little bit more of an off-puck guy on this line. I talked about it with some of the other lines, but he can be the work down low guy with these two. You do need that balance on the line. But I will say, like, if it doesn't work, he can go out for one of the extras I have here. And it's a short tournament, so it kind of depends as to whoever has the hot stick. Like, if you have a tough game, there's going to be changes. So, like, I wouldn't be married to any line combos that you see, projected before the tournament in practice, even in the first couple of games. Like, stuff is going to change. You're not going to have a perfect tournament. There's going to be, matchups and stuff that you're playing around with. But I think having Terry in here as an extra penalty killing option, you're going to need probably five forwards in your roster that you trust penalty killing. And for my extras, I'm breaking a rule that I would probably have made before the tournament, but I have Caulfield and Keller. Usually I would want a center here, just because I think if you're using your extra forwards for this, you're going to want someone who can come in and take faceoffs. I think it's easier to move a center to the wing than it is to move a winger to center, obviously. But since I do have Jack Hughes on the wing here, it could work. Even if a center goes down through to injury, you can kind of figure it out that way. And I think it's impossible to leave Caulfield and Keller off the list with how they've played this year. Keller as well being a big part of that U.S. team that won the World Championship gold earlier this year. It's hard to leave him off. He's such a good playmaker. He's such a good scorer. If you need that, kind of all-around offensive help, maybe even a power play boost, he can be the guy that can come in and bring that. Meanwhile, Caulfield, he scores so much. He scores big goals. I don't know if you can really find a spot for him in the top four lines right now. Maybe you can move out a Kyle Connor. Maybe if Jack Hughes falters again, you have to have some conversations about that. But for now, I would just take Caulfield as the extra. He doesn't need a lot of room to score. He scored big goals at kind of every level of his career. He scored a ton of goals for the U.S. in their system. So I think it would be impossible to kind of leave him off a list like this. And quickly going over some notable omissions, I actually have a decent few of forwards here. Four guys who were on the Four Nations roster last year: JT Miller, Brock Nelson, Chris Kreider, and Vincent Trocheck, and Cutter Gauthier, and then Alex Tuck is the other notable omission I have. Moving on to the defense, is a lot more similar to the Four Nations last year than what I've chosen with the forwards. We'll start with Werenski and McAvoy. This is a very successful pair at the Four Nations. Honestly, one of the biggest reasons that the U.S. didn't win the final is because of Charlie McAvoy's unfortunate shoulder injury that happened. He's hurt right now as well, which it feels like a lot of the American players are, but I think he'll be back for the Olympics, so I have him slotted in for now. Werenski and McAvoy, two very good skaters, two-way defensemen. Werenski is obviously a little bit more of an offensive guy. McAvoy's a little bit more of a defensive guy. You have your lefty-righty here, and they both have the size, the skating, and the ability to kind of play big minutes, shut down. And I will say with the U.S., all three of these pairs, and even both of the extras, are elite top pair defensemen on their respective NHL teams. That's what you're going to get here. My second pair, I have Quinn Hughes with Jake Sanderson. Obviously, I could have put Hughes with McAvoy, but I wanted to keep that pair from the Four Nations together. Quinn Hughes did not play at the Four Nations. He was injured. It's going to be a big boost for the U.S. having him with them this year, assuming, obviously, he stays healthy again. I've put him with Jake Sanderson, who came in and was a bit of a surprise during the Four Nations. Like, everyone kind of knew he was good, but he really held his own at that level. He even scored a goal in the gold medal game. I have Sanderson playing his offside, which he can do. Obviously, it's never ideal to have someone playing their offside in something like this, but I think having his skating ability and just, simple playability alongside Quinn Hughes, who's an absolute dynamo, you can't get the puck off him. You put him with a guy like Sanderson who doesn't always need to have the puck. He can play his role. He can play a lot of different roles. He can be a shutdown guy, more than competent with the puck on his stick on both sides. So I think this is a pairing that will work. Obviously, the top pairing, you can project a little bit more about how they'll do because we've seen them play together last year. Hughes and Sanderson, we haven't, but I have pretty good confidence that two elite defensemen like this will have no problem playing together, even if one of them's on their offside. My third pair, which honestly could be the first pair in some games like they were in the gold medal game against Canada last year, is Jacob Slavin and Brock Faber. This was the shutdown pair at the Four Nations last year. I know Brock Faber has struggled in the NHL at times. He's had a massive workload in Minnesota. He gets really tough minutes. The results aren't always there, and I think people are rightfully pointing that out. But I think at a tournament like this, it's not always about what your minutes are and what you do at the NHL level. It's about your profile and how you fit in with a certain partner. How can you do with a different set of minutes in a different role? And I think with how good Slavin Faber was last year at the Four Nations, they cannot split this pair up. It was the pair that they used to line match against McDavid for 2 whole games. And really, in the gold medal game, the only time that McDavid line really got going was the overtime shift where Connor McDavid scored the overtime winner when it was Adam Fox and Noah Hanifin stuck out there after an icing. Like, those are the margins in these kind of games. And I think you can't break up Slavin Faber, at least to start, just because of how good they were. Obviously, Slavin is, the premier defensive defenseman in the league. Brock Faber has a lot of supporters. He's going to be on the roster because it's Bill Guerin picking, and, Bill Guerin's not going to leave Brock Faber off. In my opinion, he should be here because of how good he was with Slavin. I think this is probably the best pure shutdown pair in the whole tournament, and I think that's going to be a big strength that the U.S. can use to weaponize and kind of shut down other teams' top lines. The extra defensemen I have are Adam Fox and John Carlson. Fox, just by merit of how good of a defenseman he is, probably deserves to be in this roster. I just can't find a spot to put him. You could put him with Slavin, but I think that kind of ruins your elite shutdown pairing that I think that they want. You could put him with Quinn Hughes, but I don't know if that's a pairing that anyone's really going to want to do in an Olympic tournament. And then I'm also not breaking up Werenski McAvoy. I will say if there's anything that they need a power play boost, if they clearly need a puck moving boost to the back, Fox is definitely the guy that would come in. He's more than good enough. He got exposed a little bit last year at the Four Nations, like I was talking about with Slavin Faber. It was his pair that was on against the McDavid line during the overtime gold medal goal. And I know there's a lot of talk about how, he's not an elite skater like I think all 6 defensemen that are in the starting pairs are here. But he's so smart that he should be able to get over it, even if he had a tough tournament last year. Like, he has to be on this roster because, if anything happens to Quinn Hughes again, you're going to need another guy that can play in the power play. If anything happens to, Faber or McAvoy, you're going to want another right shot defenseman that can move the puck really well. So he definitely has a spot here. I'm just not sure if I can quite find a home for him in the pairings. And then John Carlson's a veteran. He wasn't on the team last year. I was surprised by that. I don't know if he's in their plans this year, but I think he's had a fantastic season in Washington so far at 5-on-5. He's a veteran presence. He's a bit of a different offensive profile than the other offensive defensemen you have here. So I really think just him being a right shot offensive defenseman wins him the 8th spot, just a little bit over the notable omissions that I have here. And getting into these notable omissions, I have Lane Hudson, Jackson Lacombe, and Noah Hanifin. And lastly, we'll get into the goalies. Connor Hellebuck is obviously the starter. I don't even think I really need to talk too much about that. He's the reigning Hart winner. He's had his problems in the NHL playoffs, but He was good last year in the gold medal game for the most part. He looked good for them last year, and I just don't think you can leave a guy with the amount of talent that Connor Hellebuyck is out of the starting position, even if the backups are really good. The first backup is Jake Ottinger, which was the backup last year. He's got a lot of playoff experience with the Stars. He's been a starter for a few years. He's just a really, really good goalie. Again, I don't know how much arguing you can really have with that. The third goalie I have is Jeremy Swayman. He was the third goalie last year as well, even if he was having a really tough year. This year, he's been way better, and I think he's played his way, to remain on the team. I can't see a way that they would leave him out, even if, the two notable omissions I'll get into have also been really good. And those notable omissions are Thatcher Demko and Spencer Knight. Let me know in the comments if there's any changes you make, any guys that you think I forgot about that need to be here. And we will be back next week previewing the Czech team. And so this is my full U.S. Olympic team.